Welcome everyone to LACIGF 13. We hope you have enjoyed your lunch. And now we are going to start with session 6, a new cycle for LACIGF, opportunities for community participation and impact on internet policies in our region. The purpose of the session is to share with the community the latest advances in restructuring work and action groups within LAC-IGF, and to provide a participatory space for receiving additional feedback to receive their ideas in the ongoing redesign. During the second part of the session, participants will work in groups and on a specific topic relating to the redefinition of the operational structure of LAC-IGF. The notes of this interaction will be shared with the program committee so that this community feedback can be incorporated into the decisions that will be made in the coming months, so we can complete the reshaping of the new operation of LAC-IGF. The chairs will be Andrés Sastre in part 1, a new LAC-IGF cycle. Andrés, you have the floor. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this last session of LAC-IGF. First of all, for me, it's a pleasure to be with all of you in this version of LAC-IGF, even if remotely, especially in a session that I think that is very important and that we have discussed for many years. That is, what should be the future of LAC-IGF and how should we restructure our operations. As Claudia said, we're going to have 3 participants that are going to give us their outlook and what they've seen so far and what they think will happen in the future. And then we'll go to the working groups where we will promote interaction and we'll receive questions and ask questions. First, I'm going to recognize Ernesto Mahon from LACNIC and member of the programs committee representing the technical community. Ernesto will tell us how what has been done in recent years and the future steps for restructuring. So, Ernesto. Thank you, Andrés. Yes, indeed, I have a brief presentation. I hope it helps illustrate my speech. I'm being told that you can see my slides. Yes, indeed. Good. So, very briefly, the idea of this presentation is to share what has happened with the organizing the programs committee responsible for this LAC-IGF process. I'm not speaking of myself personally, but the group that works in the programs committee. I'm sure that most of you know what LAC-IGF means, even if you are participating in this online event. And many of you, I'm sure, may have participated in in-person events, in previous events, or you may have watched the streaming presentations. But in the end, LAC-IGF is an event. It's an annual event that lasts 3 days. And in the sessions, we approach different topics. The topics are selected based on suggestions by the community. Several years ago, we added a survey to identify the topics that will be summarized by the programs committee and included in the agenda in the in-person event. Now, in order for the community to participate, there are several services that help people, but especially selection of the head of the future venues, um, choosing a host country, so that we may get in touch with the community there and listen to their problems and the barriers they are facing. We also, one of the key elements that of the program also is the grants that we give for scholarships. So more than 25 to 30 people can attend annually. And so we it's a programs committee that is in charge of that. We are 12. There are 12 of us representing the four stakeholders: government, private, civil, and technical community. I'm part of the technical community personally. And there's also a technical secretariat. They implement the decisions. So the technical secretariat, initially it wasn't called secretariat, but they were in charge of organizing the event. And now they have been formally upgraded to the role of secretariat. And finally, the resources needed for our activities are provided by activities that contribute, and we have a fund that is managed by the organizing committee. But that's what we have so far. This is a rather peculiar event because it's online. 12 years ago, we had a first meeting with three entities: APC, LACNIC, and RITS, Brazil.
Comunidad regional a una reunión.
We invited the community for a multi-stakeholder meeting, an open event. And the idea there was to identify the topics that would be of interest to the region so that we could contribute to the global debate that would take place in December in India. A one-day event, very short, 4 discussion sessions, but of course, time was not enough. The 70 to 80 people attending that event, we thought that it had been too short. So we decided to hold online events for each of the panels, and we translated then the discussions into English, so we would have the versions in the 2 languages so that everybody could have the possibility to attend. That was the first experience, and in a way it was successful, and there were many steps, many tiers that many steps that we gave, and we tested things once and again. And in addition to the first meetings by the founders, the drivers of the process, then we had other processes, opening the activity to other sectors, formalizing the sectors, and also promoting relations with other sectors of the community. For instance, the activity in Trinidad and Tobago, together with the Caribbean um, Union and the Caribbean IGF, that is the oldest in the world. So we've gone a long way, and I think that we succeeded in many things. We met many requirements, and we could solve many problems. So that brought us to the current situation. The members of the programs committee, we believe that we need a change. We need to focus more on the process so as to meet the needs of a more mature community, a broader community, more varied, more complex. So this LAC IGF that we have, what you see today online, in the end, was successful. It was a relevant event, but as years have gone by, it's this format is not so good. So we have taken the steps needed to recover relevance so as to put LAC IGF in the place that the community is demanding it to. Some of the challenges that were put forward last year led us to present some results in Brazil last year. Nacho will present them. So we had some challenges. In this last slide, you have the challenges. There are all sorts of claims related to the form, to foundation, the equality, representativeness, and the importance of the space. Why should we debate here? What are we aiming at? What do we want to achieve, or what should we achieve? And also related to communications. Of course, those of us in the programs committee, past and present members, we may have not been able to tell the community how to participate. This may have been one of the flaws, and we were told about it. And so we really wanted to open the space more so as not to contemplate the speakers and the chairs, who of course have contributed from the very beginning, but also incorporating new players that may contribute with to increase the value for the community. And a significant aspect that I don't want to forget has to do with the importance, the relevance of this space. What happens with the discussions? What comes out of them? Who, what do we do with the discussions? So in the end, that claim that this should, that we should have more influence, that so that the decisions adopted by each sector may listen to what is said here, so that the public policies may improve for the sake of the development of the regional community, so that internet governance may contribute to the development of the best society in our regency.
So those are the challenges that we face. We still continue facing these challenges, and then I'll give the floor to Nacho, who will be telling you about the next change we have ahead for LAC IGF. Thank you. Thank you, Ernesto. And let me introduce Nacho. You already have met Nacho. He is a general manager of LAC TLD and in charge of the program committee on behalf of the technical, for the technical area. He'll speak about the new model for LAC IGF. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Ernesto. I'm trying to find my presentation. Just bear with me.
Para mostrarles. Ahí estamos. A ver. Aquí está. No sé si ya la pueden ver.
So, can you see my screen? Yes, we can. So, continuing. Well, first of all, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Miguel Ignacio Estrada, or Nacho. I'm General Manager of LAC TLD. I am a member of this multi-stakeholder committee, or rather the program committee. I've been here for 2 years now, and I experienced the entire process. It has been most interesting to join you along this process, particularly all the queries made, all the consultations, and to see how this proposal was dealt with. I will tell you that we already shared this with you in the past, but for those of you who haven't seen it, well, I think this might be interesting. Now, what was done following the report? Raúl Echeverría, who was in charge of presenting this at LACIGF in Bolivia, in La Paz. The program committee received all the outputs. We held a meeting, and together we put forward ideas and started working on a LACIGF 2.0, as we like to call it internally. And as from that meeting, a committee was established, a smaller committee for the wording, the drafting of this proposal. In addition to that, and parallel to that, parallel to the ideas defined for this proposal, we had a consultancy. This is Raúl Echeverría and Carolina Aguirre. They're well known at LACIGF and also in the region. So we had a consultancy in order to obtain feedback from the region, from the community. And following that, to start thinking about a proposal with new statutes, with new bylaws. So this proposal has been received, and we now conducted a new consultation, not specifically on the statutes, but on the guiding principles and ideas of that, the guiding ideas for that proposal. This chart summarizes the general idea. I will explain it very briefly. Let me start with the intersessional processes. Part of the ideas were that this should not be an event, but an annual process that we work throughout the year. That is why we thought about having intersessional groups based on different topics. Or at least let me tell you afterwards which is the initial idea. This has yet to be defined. We also started considering that it would be interesting to have a presentation of success cases, not to include these in the workshops alone, but also to invite organizations that have had success cases on some of the topics that we define. And then, so that these cases should preferably be approached in a multi-sectorial way, and also to open the agenda somehow to the public. Something similar to what is done at the IGF. A call is made for workshops, and that agenda during the event itself will be done through workshops that are not defined by the current committee, but in a different way. So those would be the three major elements that would be taking place throughout the year. We'll be working on these during the year, and then this would culminate in an annual meeting. At that meeting, we'll be sharing the papers produced. We'd also speak about the success cases, and we would be organizing workshops that would be selected as well. The idea is to have a high-level meeting where all the materials I have explained are then submitted to the decision makers. The community then, can you follow the mouse? If we start on the left, the community would then define the topics based on consultations. This would be done every year. Then the multi-stakeholder committee or another committee, the selection committee, we haven't defined this yet, would then select the study groups or working groups, and these should be multi-stakeholder and should really reflect the vision of all the different stakeholders. Then the multi-stakeholder group would then start to find success cases to be presented at the annual meeting. And then the different sectors, the different stakeholders would define this. This hasn't been defined yet, but they would then have a second committee, which is a workshop selection committee, which would receive all the input, all the proposals for workshops. They would then be scored and those with the highest ranking and following certain criteria year after year would then be used for the annual agenda of the LAC-IGF meeting. So in that way, we expect to cover many of the points covered in Raúl Echeverria's report in La Paz, such as innovative formats to open up the agenda to the community so that the community can share their efforts in workshops. The idea is also to have new ideas and new ways of organizing the workshops. So I think this would be a good way of dealing with this. Also, in terms of the speakers, one of the criticism we received was that we normally had the same speakers always. So the community now is invited to propose speakers for the meetings. In terms of the annual meeting, tangible results, the idea is through documents describing success cases, and then having reports in writing so that this is then delivered to the participants of the high-level meeting with the intention of then informing the different positions for the moment of defining public policies. And this high-level guide should be linked with other forums. So this would be then related to other forums so that the outputs reach out to the governance scenario. So what's next? We have to review the statutes proposal together with the feedback already received initially. We will have a group activity now, and the idea is to submit this to the program committee, so then the program committee can start defining the new statutes that will rule LAC-IGF. Following that, these other statutes will have to be approved. This will be then followed by the implementation of the improvements, which would take place the following year. With this aim, we have to define a secretariat. LACNIC finished the La Paz meeting a year ago and stated they would stop being in charge of the secretariat. So the time has come then for LAC-IGF to take a different path. So the program committee now defines the criteria for selecting the new secretariat. We made a call for people who would be interested in this. The idea is to have an agenda explaining how this process should take place. They provided then the guidelines based on which they make the calls. The idea is to make a call in November, and then to define a new secretariat by the beginning of 2021. So that would be all on my behalf. Thank you, Andres. Thank you, Nacho. Very interesting, 2020, and there's a lot of work ahead still for the committee next year. I now give the floor to Lia Patricia Hernandez, who is a member of the program committee with the civil society and today is host of LAC-IGF 2017 in the Panama edition. So, hello, Lia, you have the floor. Hello, Andres. Hello, Nacho. Hello, Ernesto, and everyone who has joined us through the Latin America and Caribbean region. As representative of the civil society at IGF since 2018, right after having held the 10th meeting of LAC-IGF, and also following the thread of the different considerations and results, experiences, and work done by the community in the program committee and with the consultants that help us. Let me say that regarding the title of this panel, which is a new cycle for LAC-IGF and opportunities for community participation, I think this should explain, or we should see how the community can participate. Both Ernesto and Nacho made a very good summary of all the results obtained, and together they explained that many people continue saying, why do we always see the same people? Why do we always have the same stakeholders and organizations? But these things will not change unless there is a real involvement of the community on these subjects. I think that the Latin American Caribbean area uh, and I think that this is a region which really has to actively participate in the processes. For example, Carolina and Raúl, who will be the consultants, who will be preparing this report to see how we can obtain information. So the role of civil society is not just Maria Paz and Valeria. We represent organizations, but in fact, this involves every single one of us. We also represent different sectors at the program committee. The idea is to encourage everyone to participate. This will be a change in paradigm of LAC-IGF. This has to do with the future of LAC-IGF, and the community has to really take on this role. And hopefully this will then involve new stakeholders. And from the program committee, and in the past 2 years in which I've been part of the program committee, we face a very important task when we define the panels and we decide on the contents. We send out polls to the community, but very often we just don't receive any answers. When we open up the space for people who wish to participate in the committee, for example, there we also face an important challenge because people think that organizing an event will take up a lot of time of their work. So if you have a committee with many people involved, people perceive that they will have to carry all the burden of organizing. Then we have the topic of guaranteeing this equality in a panel.
Other years, we've seen the fact that in a panel they were all men or males and no women. So how can those things be fixed? Because the programs committee works hard to have an equal representation in each panel, and I think that this became more evident last year in La Paz, where there was a panel with 100% women, two panels with 100% women, and there are new topics also and new modalities such as workshops to implement the discussions of the panel. So all those were contributions that, but are not reflected here. And I think that there's still a lot to do, but not does it depend on LACNIC as a secretariat or the programs committee, but it depends on the hundreds of people that are today connected to the Zoom or to the people who will visit LAC-IGF through YouTube may get more engaged with this. So I invite you. And as an example, I put my own personal experience. My first LAC IGF was in 2014 in San Salvador, and since then I've attended all. And at the beginning, I was just an observer, or but then in Panama, I I had a better role, and then I became, in 2018, I became a member of the programs committee. And so the people in the rest of Latin America and the Caribbean, I invite you, because the processes, they sometimes we receive the complaints that we repeat the topics, but please get involved so that you may contribute to the sustainability of LAC IGF and that it will please all the community. Thank you, Leah. As always, that was very interesting. What you say is very, very important. And of course, the work ahead is not easy at all. You mentioned many tasks, not just of the programs committee, but also many organizations that have been involved in like IGF. And but as Ernesto said, um, life is uh, always changing, and that is what we hope that like IGF would do. Now I have a question here by Raquel. She says, how do you coordinate those changes of the evolution of LAC IGF with all the work of revision and restructuring of the mechanisms of digital cooperation at a global level, such as HLPDC, the roadmap, etc. I don't know whether Ernesto or Leah, who wants to answer, or should I read the question again? Well, I don't know, Ernesto or Leah. I think that the expert is Maria Paz. She's one of the Maria Paz, do you agree? Would you like to answer? Yeah, sure. Thank you, Miguel. Well, let me introduce myself. You may have heard me in at other meetings. I'm Maria Paz Canales. I'm Executive Director of Digital Rights, and I'm also part of the Programs Committee of since 2017. And right now, I'm a member of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group of IGF Global. That's why my colleague said that maybe I'm the most suitable person to answer. Um, um, Raquel also was a part of this group representing the Latin American region, and I know that she's still working a lot. So that is Raquel who asks a question. Well, both processes have been triggered to seek to try to become more effective and to have a better impact of the discussions at a global level in the governance of the internet, but also at a regional level in the decision making in public policies and private policies that and so that we can establish the paths for the development of the internet. So I think that we are now conducting a very good review that is in line with the model that is being analyzed at a global level, which is reflected in the report by the high panel. And after that, and later on, the report turns into concrete recommendations, and the Secretary General of the UN turns it into a roadmap to implement the issues described in the report. That is underway because what the report did and the roadmap did was to gather suggestions for modifications of the governance of the internet by creating new structures under the umbrella of global IGF. And if you look at those possibilities for change, there's a certain correlation with what we are evaluating for LAC IGF. So it is in that sense that there's a sort of virtuous circle that both reforms are taking place in parallel. And well, what is still pending is the last phase of implementation of the changes of like IGF, because that will occur when we have clearer ideas of the change of a global IGF. But in a nutshell, I think that the changes in the two processes can be summarized or highlighted into two lines. One, what I already mentioned, to try to enhance the impact of whatever we do and to draw more concrete recommendations that can be used by the different stakeholders. So I think that everybody recognizes that the discussions in the LACA IGF, we have a lot of discussions. However, sometimes people find it very difficult to link some of those discussions to implementation situations, to put it in black and white. So Natra mentioned LAC-IGF 2.0 that includes the workshops, intercession to generate cases of success, and how that information that is gathered may feed the discussion of the high-level discussion in the future as part of the events. So that type of source is what we want to promote. That is, how can we how to go about the discussions in in the discussions, and how that will translate into the implementation of those amendments. And the second part, that is also something that we expressed now, and especially Leah mentioned it, is the community's participation, because really in both cases modifications have to do with a potential opening and a greater active participation by the community. And this should not be only designed by a group, a closed group of experts, that although it's a vast group and they have worked trying to implement all the diversity that Leah mentioned, it is still quite a limited group, because we're always the same people that monitor the process at a local and regional and global level, while the idea is that all the community should be empowered as creators, and that the substance that they take may not just be to propose the sessions, but there should be a more sustained involvement of the different parties in that have to do with governance, and that translates in the intercession work. So that's what I had to say. Thank you. There are several questions. We don't have time for all of them, but we have one by Ailis Rojas, who says, how to achieve an effective incidence of LAC-IGF in the local, regional, global public policies. And then Reynaldo Alonso says that their organization in Cuba is committed in the systematic participation of LAC-IGF, and he says, how can LACGIF succeed in the implementation of the recommendations on governance in the region based on the current models and changes? Should I answer the first one on public policy? Ernesto? Yes, I can contribute to your answer. Well, in terms of incidence, this is clearly what we are aiming at. That's what the proposal is seeking. First of all, in achieving a better participation of the governments in LAC-IGF, and that's why we are holding the high-level meeting, and then to give the government officials all the outputs, that is tangible material for them to take home and to see our best practices, so that when they draft the bills, they may have it available, um, so that they may be familiar with the topic, and so they won't invent the wheel, but so that they could consider the previous experiences in the region. I think that LAC-IGF should already do that. Maybe it's not such a simple thing, becoming that tool. So I think that we should work at that, and I think that this new proposal of LAC-IGF is clearly aimed at that, getting a better participation based on that session and its relations with other spaces. I don't know whether Leah would like to add anything. Or Ernesto. No, I absolutely support what you just said. We believe that it's very relevant to give a quality participation of the different players. So far, the current format prevents some sectors from expressing themselves. Sometimes they don't understand how to participate. It's not user-friendly. So maybe we should change the settings so that those actors, especially government actors, may interact more easily. I think that this is one of the things that we really have to improve. Although everything is available in the sites of the different of the various events, the information that we're going to discuss is not always well presented, so that the decision makers will incorporate that material as part of their discussions and decisions. There's no doubt that if you add things at the local level and in the development of those processes at a local level, there may be representatives of the communities. In the end, having the information available is absolutely necessary for it to be used by the different actors, and it needs to be used also in the different processes. Let me add something very quickly about this question. I especially want to highlight that the participation of the decision makers in the LAC-IGF, they should attend not just as speakers, but also as members of the audience, so that they may see what happens in the event. So at the as members of the committee, we have to um, address the people in their community in a multi-sectoral way, incorporating the people attending this event, and probably the topics that the people will discuss may be very interesting for the country. That's why it was so important to bring a representative of El Salvador. That's a typical example of someone who had never participated, but she plays a role. And so in the panel, we invited her representing a region. And so that's why we chose a woman and a member of government. And when I was chatting with some of the people of Central America, they believe that the final reports and the recommendations of LACIGF that are presented are binding for the governments. And it's very difficult for me to say that they're not binding, that they are mere recommendations that they can adopt just to trigger the beginning of their changes.
This is also very important because very often they don't wish to work because they feel that they are forced to comply with what is decided here or that has to be implemented in their respective states. Thank you, Leah. This first part has been very interesting. We are a bit past the time. Let us now go over to the second part, which is the breakout sessions. So I'd like to thank all the panelists, and we go over to the next section.
Andrés, ¿quieres que siga yo, María Paz?
Andrés, shall you go on, or Maria Paz? Well, you have a link there to access the different groups that you can continue.